Okay, so I saw this on Twitter. It says, "Do you really think that I Am Sasha Fierce is her worst album? Why do you think most of the fans hate on it so much?" And I have an answer for this. So I've been saying this, but I Am Sasha Fierce serves the same purpose to Beyonce's discography that Music Box serves to Mariah Carey's discography, and I'll explain. So basically, both of these albums definitely helped them cross over to a wider audience, aka white people. I mean, let's just say it. These are more commercial for them. If I was going to recommend an album from both of their discography, I would never recommend this one because I feel like artistically it is not who they are. And if you go into this listening to these albums and expecting them to have more stuff like this, you're probably going to be really disappointed. And so every artist kind of has to have an album like that in their discography because they want to cross over into whatever genre that is. They want to expand their fan base, and pretty much every artist has an album in that respect like that. And so let's go on to Beyonce's case first, and then I'll talk about Mariah's case. So basically, with Beyonce, I would say she's mostly an R&B artist. Yes, she has some pop songs, but she's mainly rooted in R&B, and she has some other genres that she's tapped into as well. She's very versatile. Even the Destiny's Child stuff, it was mainly R&B. Survivor, it was more pop with some R&B tendencies, you could say. And then the first two albums were very rooted in R&B, again with a little bit of pop tendencies and maybe some funk and stuff like that. And then so whenever we get to 2008, Beyonce had to make I Am Sasha Fierce because it's like she didn't want to be left behind with the times. Because at this point, pop music was really on the rise and was getting super popular, and R&B just wasn't as commercially viable and successful as it had been in the early 2000s and in the 90s. So therefore, she had to make that shift if you want to stick around and have longevity in the industry. It just is what it is. And so she had a lot of hits off of this album. For example, If I Were a Boy was pretty successful for her. Halo is one of her most popular songs, and I know it's very overplayed, but that's one of my favorite Beyonce songs as well. Single Ladies had the whole video, had the choreography as well. So those are, three smash hits off the top. And there's also some other fan favorites on this album, like Diva as well, for example. And so this was just Beyonce going more pop, going more commercial, and it is what it is. And there's also some really great cuts on here, like Hello, that is one of my favorite Beyonce songs, and that one deserves a little bit more appreciation. And there's also some songs that I don't really care for on here, like Radio. I've never cared for that one. Ave Maria, it's a good vocal performance, but it gets kind of boring. That's Right, You're Beautiful, Satellites. And she split this album up to where you have the up tempos on one side for the most part, and then the ballads on the other side. So she was able to kind of find a way to do that. And it was a way where I feel like she kept the essence of what a lot of her music is about, but she just adapted her sound commercially to what was popular at that time. And she also had Videophone, and then she did the remix with Lady Gaga there. And then in 2009, she had that collaboration with Lady Gaga, Telephone. So it was very smart on her part to do that. I understand it, and there was a lot of great music to come out of this album at the end of the day. However, kind of going on to the reason why a lot of Beyonce fans don't really go up for this album is, simply put, she's just made better music than this. I would put the first two albums above this, especially B-Day. I love B-Day, even though a lot of people don't really care for it. Apparently, it's very divided in fandom about that. Then after this, we had Four. And if you're going to ask me to pick a Beyonce album that really shows who she is artistically, I'm going to give you Four, and that is one of her favorite albums as well. Stuff like Love on Top is a great song. I Love Party, Till the End of Time, Countdown. I mean, the album just has a lot of fan favorites. It's a great R&B album, and she made it in the time where EDM was really popping, and I'm glad that she did that because all that stuff aged like milk, and Four is still a great album. So that's what I would say really defines Beyonce as an artist for the most part, or you could even say self-titled, and that was a lot of genre bending on her part, and even had hits like Drunken Love, for example, and Partition. 7-Eleven was also successful. And then after that, she did Lemonade, which was a more personal album for her, talking about the infidelity and how she was ultimately able to overcome that and all those things. And there's a lot of great cuts off there. Sandcastle is one of my favorites. Diary Lessons, Don't Hurt Yourself, Love Drought, All Night, and more. Then after that, we had The Gift, which was a big thing for the Black community. I like the album for what it is. Some of my favorite songs in there, Black Parade and Spirit. Then after that, we did Renaissance, and that was a huge cultural moment, objectively, and everyone was talking about it. A lot of people were obsessed with it, myself included, and for her to kind of tap into that dance music and the house music, and also still have elements of like R&B and just what she was able to do with the genres of that, it was an incredible album and a career highlight. And then she does Cowboy Carter, which is a whole country album for the most part, with some R&B tendencies and some other stuff as well. And so just artistically, Beyonce has done so much better than I Am Sasha Fierce. And some people will like the album, but like I said, she's just reached better heights with other projects, and so that is kind of why the Hive doesn't really go up for it. And I would say that most of us agree that this is a good album, right? But in comparison to everything else, just kind of falls flat. And that's kind of what Beyonce does with pretty much every single album, is she's going to keep growing, she's going to make better stuff, she's going to change genres, and she's just always evolving artistically and everything. And in comparison to everything else, you know, that is what it is there. And, you know, Beyonce's quote-unquote worst album is still better than a lot of y'all face best albums. So it's a good album for what it is, but she's just made better. It's not representative of her as an artist, and that is why the Hive doesn't really go up for iamsashafierce. Now onto the case with Mariah and why she had to make the Music Box album. Basically, her debut album was very popular, I believe 15 million worldwide, and she had 4 #1 singles: Vision of Love, and then she also had Love Takes Time, Someday, and I Don't Want to Cry. She won a couple Grammys for it, Soul Train Awards. Like, it was a successful album for her, right? And then her second album, Emotions, that's when she was able to finally get more involved in terms of production. She co-produced the entire thing, wrote all the songs in it, and she wrote all the songs in her debut album as well, right? And so it was just a lot more her. It was definitely something that was more focused on soul and gospel and jazz, with songs like The Wind, which is a great jazz piece. Make It Happen was more of a gospel moment. She also had stuff like Till the End of Time and So Blessed. And unfortunately, the album underperformed due to her standards. I believe it was number 4 on the chart, and I believe it sold 8 million worldwide. But in comparison to having only 1 #1 with Emotions versus 4 #1s, and 8 million versus 15 million, it just didn't compete with the sales of her debut. And so because of that, they were like, okay, we want you to make some more pop, adult contemporary stuff. And so then she made Music Box. And I just don't think that this is the album Mariah would have made if she would have been able to make exactly what she wanted to. Because basically, watching her interviews and stuff like that, she said she wanted to have a rapper on Dream Lover, but the label wasn't ready for that. And Tommy Mottola, with his racist self, of course wasn't going to let that happen. But even if you hear the B-side and stuff that was on the rarities, like Do You Think of Me, that was the B-side to Dream Lover, and that's definitely more of an R&B focused song. All I Live For was a great up-tempo. Working Hard was also something that she just released this past year on the new version of Music Box. And then we had Everything Fades Away, which was on the international edition of the album. For the most part, these are more R&B focused type of songs, but of course Tommy wasn't going to let that happen. Even Working Hard was like New Jack Swing more so, if anything, and that was definitely something that kind of reminded me of something that would be on Janet Jackson's Janet album in 1993, right, that came out the same year as Music Box. And so if you listen to this in comparison to her discography, there's not an album that sounds like this. You might get a song or two, but it just doesn't sound like it, because that's not the kind of artist that she is, you know. And she made this album, and she had songs like Hero, which is one of her most popular songs today, and that's something that she wrote for Gloria Estefan, right? And she wasn't going to do it herself, but Tommy's like, I think you should keep it. Without You was a big international hit as well. Dream Lover was #1 for 8 weeks. And then stuff like Never Forget You, which is one of my favorite Mariah Carey songs. She also has other ballads like Just to Hold You Once Again. I'd say this album is more ballad heavy than up tempos. But we also had a great gospel offering in Anytime You Need a Friend, for example. Now That I Know is a great record. So she was able to show a little bit of kind of like her musical personality on here. But I would never recommend you listen to this album if you wanted to get into Mariah, because again, like I was saying earlier, if you listen to this album and expect her discography to sound like this, you're going to be sorely disappointed, because she did this album and it was successful. It's her best-selling album. I believe it's like 28 million worldwide or something like that. It crossed over into Europe. She got a couple of hits off of it. It did what it needed to do. And then after that, she made the Christmas album, where she was getting back into, you know, her more R&B and gospel roots. And then Daydream, which was R&B pop. And then Butterfly, which was really more hip-hop focused, and so on. So this just doesn't really show who Mariah Carey is as an artist. I know some lambs might disagree with me and say, oh, it wasn't whitewashed. But come on, listen to Emotions and then listen to this and then tell me what you think, and then go watch her interviews and tell me what you think. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me. And if you want to know how I kind of came to my conclusion about the Music Box album and my opinions on it at large, I did a deep dive on Mariah Carey on my YouTube channel, Anastasia25, and I talked about the album at large, what it meant for her career, my perspectives on it, and showed interview clips to kind of reinforce what I was saying and how I came to that conclusion. Ultimately, again, this is a good album, but in comparison to the rest of the albums that she would release even that decade, it's towards the bottom, and certainly in her discography, it's not really a favorite and one that I go to. But again, you know, both of these are good albums, and like I said, every artist basically has to do an album like this in their career in order to cross over and everything. But yeah, I guess this is kind of talking about the crossover album more, if anything. And so let me know what you guys think on both of these albums. If you have listened to them, what are your favorite songs? What are your opinions on the album? How do you rank them in their respective discographies? Do you agree with my opinions today? Do you disagree with me? And let's have that conversation. But this was something that was really fun to do because this is something that I've been thinking for a while, and I was going to make a whole dedicated video on it, and then this just kind of led me to make it happen. No pun intended. That's one of Mariah's best songs. So yeah, let's continue that conversation.